from Balochistan and give Baloch complete authority to decide for themselves.
The Baloch feel that if they don't act now, they will become marginalized.
What lies ahead for Balochistan?
Balochistan, Bangladesh 2.0, streaming now.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi. Joining me here in the studio is my colleague Amit Ranjan Kumar. And I'm sure you must have seen episodes of the Shark Tank, the United States version. After that, the Indian version got so famous, we've come up with a season 2, probably a season 3 as well. But why the Shark Tank? Why is it so important? What about the startup ecosystem and the valuations, the words that we kept on hearing? Why is all of that dissipating now in 2023? That's going to be our focus over the next couple of minutes. Now, have you wondered where do startups net their own valuation from? We saw a major boom in startups across the country: startup bubble, unicorn, deca-corns, money, the Silicon Valley, profit, high stakes, and a new era of entrepreneurship. These were some words that were heavily in use ever since the onset of the last decade or so. But sooner or later, it's all fizzling out, almost like slipping through the cracks from inside a tightly held fist. But why? Have you thought about the intriguing reasons why startups appear unfazed by their bottom line, prioritizing growth over profitability? But even as the startup landscape is shifting altogether, questions have come to the fore. Have the tables turned? And what's the impact on the future of innovation per se? Before 2023, India had some deca-corns. Now it has none. What's more, in the year 2023, not one new unicorn has been added to the list of startups in India. So what went wrong with valuations of Indian startups? The real Shark Tank, where we expose the truth behind India's startup frenzy. Soaring valuations, elusive profits, but what's real and what's the hype is something that people still don't know. Get down in the comment sections and help us understand what you make of this eye-opening journey into the heart of startups. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, Amit right here in the studio. He's put out 2 fantastic documentaries called The Real Shark Tank, and we are going to show you a snippet. There are 2 episodes on the News9 Plus application. If you haven't already downloaded that application, I urge and implore you to download that application. It's available on television, on your mobile phones, on the Apple App Store, on the Google Play Store, for other incisive analysis and cutting-edge documentaries. If business is not your cup of tea, maybe politics is. If that's not your cup of tea, maybe entertainment, sports, you name it, we've got it in the time that you have for us to spare. Take a look at this snippet of the first episode of the documentary, The Real Shark Tank, and then we'll come back for more.
Join the gang, join them and become rich, become a billionaire.
It's like a pyramid scheme. You look at the unicorns and see how many are profitable today, then you worry. How long can they sustain? How long can they last?
Ultimately, to become a business, you have to be profitable.
Is profitability the only metric? Not really. Value creation is the metric.
It's a slippery slope and you may kind of really get carried away with your fast growth or growth at any cost.
So what's the real Shark Tank? If you were to understand that, I think it's important to understand who are the sharks in that Shark Tank. And the shark is not always profit. The shark is not always market. The shark, more often than not, is not even your angel investor or the venture capitalist who has taken an early bet in investing in the business. The real Shark Tank is the purpose of every business's existence. And that is creating value for investors.
It's very simple. A founder really believes in something. He's passionate about it. He picks up his four people who are equally mad like him to kind of really start something.
It's an idea which tries to get a larger space in a relatively shorter amount of time.
Let's jog our memories back, 75 years or so. 1957, there was a group of 8 founders that later got referred to as the Traitorous 8. And why the Traitorous 8? Because these 8 people quit their existing jobs at Shockley International and started what perhaps in modern lexical could be referred to as the first startup of sorts, Fairchild Semiconductors. And arguably so, this was the first company that became a disruptor and an innovator and created a whole body of integrated circuits and transistor chips that we see the world of IT really riding on today.
The startup market historically has gone through many cycles, and there are cycles where cost of capital is low, funding is easily available, a lot of companies get funded, and see, the startup model is designed for to accommodate a lot of failures. Why failures happen?
A lot of startups start with an idea which they have, a product which they want to build, and they have not thought through our distribution and the payers, and that's where the mortality happens. So it is not about that greed of making money fast and not building institution. I don't think that's the reason for mortality. The mortality is, am I thinking outside in, or I am thinking inside out?
A startup has to focus on the customer, understand the customer data, customer insights, because they are looking for product market fitment. Once they figure out the product market fitment, they have to get the operations in place. So that is where the supply chain becomes important. Then they have to sort of go to a larger market. They have to build a brand and have a brand recall. So branding becomes important. Once they have figured that out, then they have to start growing the top line. So revenues become important. And ultimately, to become a business, you have to be profitable. So profit become important then.
Well, I guess I'm old. My generation, in my times, I feel very uneasy. Because what mattered was a good business plan which showed, not immediately, not tomorrow, some things take time, but showed profitability somewhere down the line in a very sensible way. Today I look at business plans and they're looking only at top line, how I can grow my revenues, 2x, 3x, 4x, 10x.
Risk is there in every business. Who would have thought in January 2023 that business models of Google or business models of Microsoft can be disrupted? You have a chat engine, chat bot called ChatGPT. Again, developed by an AI startup, OpenAI. Was it profitable? No, it wasn't profitable. How did it survive Shark Tank? Because of the investment that Microsoft made into it, it ended up creating huge value for its original founders.
A startup entrepreneur is interested in becoming a billionaire, in creating a unicorn, in creating a deca-corn, in creating whatever cons they want to create. All of them want to be rich. Is there anything wrong in it?
I think from the first funding round, typically 5 years is what we see when investor asks for, and that's a very fair amount of time for startups to turn profitable.
If you look at edtech, like one of the biggest companies in the edtech sector, I think to acquire a customer, they are spending as much as they're earning, right? So the customer acquisition cost is very, very high for them.
PayPal is a globally recognized payment gateway today, but how did that journey really start? If you look at PayPal in the late 1990s, that was the age of Palm Pilots. Did it do well? No, it did not. There was innovation at play. PayPal actually did not find its market until it introduced something that today we refer to as cashback. So PayPal was willing to offer a cashback of up to $10 per transaction in a bid to acquire more customers.
Is profitability the only metric? Not really. Value creation is the metric. And that value creation and value realization at the end of the day. So I'll give you an example. For example, when YouTube was made or Instagram was made, extremely valuable loss-making properties. They found the right homes in Google and in Facebook, and those companies had the infrastructure to monetize it in a beautiful way. So it's not that because that was not profitable, that is not valuable.
It's like a pyramid scheme. I'm not saying this is intentional, I'm not saying something's happening there, but people get caught up in this, and many young people who have very exciting ideas or dreams in their eyes suddenly begin to read headlines and box items of how somebody sold their company for X million dollars, how some investor came and put in so much money, how some company became a unicorn. You look at the unicorns and see how many are profitable today, and then you worry. How long can they sustain? How long can they last?
Now, what happened to PayPal? Of course, Elon Musk invested at the boom of what was called as the tech revolution, Y2K year, the year 2000, iconic year for IT, and that sort of merged with X.com. What happened in 2002, just 2 years later? Did PayPal become profitable? No, it did not. It eventually got sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Now, 20 years later, does PayPal really need to worry about its profitability?
First, you have to make sure you survive. So what does that mean? You have to go and fundraise. Fundraise cycles keep shifting. Sometimes it's GMV, sometimes it's unit economics, sometimes it's market share. It's just and you keep iterating your business to be in sync with the short-term requirements of the market.
Few people are building companies for a generation, or building it because they want to be in that area, or building it to say, hey, I'm planning this in a way that 4 years down the line I'll begin to have profits.
I don't think a founder typically starts a business that I want to get acquired. Typically, a lot of time it's driven by venture capital funds, right? VC funds who have got and we have seen that cycle, right? Kind of who actually get specific things signed up, right, with you. I don't think a typically founder would start a business to get acquired.
Amazon was a startup, Google was a startup, Facebook was a startup. A company that starts and till it gets to a stage where it can sustain itself over a long period of time, that is the destination. Now, the way it works is that a lot of startups, usme you need funding right up, and investors put in money, and those investors seek or need an exit, and then they invest in other companies of the early stage. So that is the exit part. So exit is a financial outcome. It's company's journey continues.
What is the purpose of these startups really? These startups, of course, while being risky, while being non-profitable, while being highly invested in ventures, they're typically serving the job of being technology laboratories. And is their end goal really to stay in the business and make money by virtue of profits? Or is the purpose really to not really worry that much about profits, but worry about the next big company which can acquire them and yet serve the same purpose that it started with of maximizing shareholder value?
This is a very new situation that is coming, where there will be global monopolies or near monopolies with 2 or 3 big players who are going to dominate, because they'll have an unfair advantage. That is why the biggest danger to all of us are digital monopolies, global digital monopolies. Microsoft is a global digital monopoly in B2B. Salesforce.com is another digital monopoly.
I have worries, but I told you I'm old generation. This new one, but does worry me, and I don't want to paint everybody the same brush. That would be grossly unfair. Many entrepreneurs are fantastic. They're committed. They want to make profits. They will. Many have. Some companies have proven in a few years they've begun to make profits and are doing well.
There has been a reasonable shift in the investor mindset. People who are writing free checks for just product market fit are asking tougher questions on unit economics and are asking for far more tangible roadmaps to profitability in general. So one of the big stories which I think will come out on the Indian ecosystem 3 years from now or 5 years from now are not successful unicorns, but successful, wildly profitable unicorns. We are hearing of D2C companies who are getting to profitability as a company at the 100-200 crore mark, right? This was unimaginable 3 years back, there was a saying that you needed to be 2,000 crores revenue to be profitable. So I think the full ecosystem is rebooting to a new environment where profitability is far more important.
We really started with the story of, what is referred to as the traitorous eight and their startup Fairchild Semiconductors in 1957. Now, by 1960, it had become a Silicon Valley incubator of sorts, and it was directly or maybe indirectly involved in creating dozens of incorporations, including the likes of Intel and Advanced Micro Devices. In 2016, it got acquired by ON Semiconductors for $2.4 billion. That, I think, in a nutshell, is a classic example of what a startup story really looks for. You sustain over the decades, you run after evolving technologies, you keep reinventing yourself, but at the end of the day, it may not be always as much about profits as it would be about creating value for shareholders. And that is the real Shark Tank that startup entrepreneurs are trying to survive in day after day.
Well, so that was the first episode. Congratulations on that really nicely, produced documentary, Amit. It's called Where Startups, Net Their Profit. That's the idea. And the second episode is about how these devaluations in the year 2023 have seemed to gone down. So there is no profitability, but now the valuations that were certainly high over the last couple of years, that has also gone down. All right. We will show you the second episode as well. So don't worry about that. And again, urge you to download the application. But, Amit, let's get the ball rolling here. Profitability not being important for these companies. I mean, somewhere in the documentary, a talking head says that, companies exist to make money, not lose money, right? So why are these new startups, undaunted in the face of no profit? I mean, I understand that there's a shortcut that they're using here, but this seems to be really scary. There's no profit, but you're continuing on with your work.
Yeah. Startup is a term that was not in common lexicon maybe even 10 years ago. These companies which are called startups, they are trying to cover a huge amount of distance in a very short period of time, and that's why there are these rounds of funding that they need. They need valuations, and they need customers to build their database of customers, and customer acquisition either comes over time or comes at a price.
Right.
So in their case, it comes at a huge price that they have to pay. They have to pay. We gave the example of Fairchild Semiconductors. It was a loss-making company through decades, but it was an incubator of technology, and it survived those decades. Today, just few years ago, it was sold at north of $2.5 billion to a giant, ON Semiconductors. That is PayPal. It was not a profit-making company. It has basically become synonymous with basically online payments,
right?
Because it was the first. Flipkart. It was not a profit-making company. Probably it is still not, but it is solving a problem for Walmart right now, which has basically taken it over and is willing to basically pay that price for that customer, keeping those customers. So while profitability may be something that you can achieve after some period of time, and if you are able to go through that, if you are solving a problem and if you are creating value, the catch is that you have to catch some of the value that you're creating. And that is
because that is what attracts the investors and your potential clients as well.
And that is why they have fallen short when even now valuations are going down. So profitability always, as much as I could understand.
But wait, hold on. One step, one punch, one round at a time. Profitability not being important is not wrong altogether, right?
It's excusable for a certain period of time.
For a certain period of time.
In case of startups.
But this period of time is also subjective here.
As long as value creation is happening, you are building your database, you are adding to your customer database over time, profitability is excusable.
All right. So now that we know that profit not being profitable is excusable as long as you're creating the right kind of value. Yes. Now, when you start comparing value creation vis-a-vis profitability, what's your take on that? Where does the Indian startup ecosystem stand at this critical juncture?
All of them are creating value. One of the companies that has been in the news of late in the edtech sector They were pioneers in that. They created value. But EdTech, again, it was, as one of our talking heads gave that example, that customer acquisition is very costly in that space. So most of them who are still around, they're creating value. Those who are not around, maybe after 10 years, you will know that they fell short of creating value, they fell short of profitability.
Right.
Because if they're not creating value, investors will not come. There's a very good quote I will take from one of our talking heads, that always go to companies where customer money is coming, because investor money comes to the companies where customer money is coming. So it's a good round sort of a circle, that if you're getting customer money, you're going to get investor money. But investor money will only come to companies where customer money is coming. So you have to get those customers, and customers come as long as value is being created.
But in 2023, that valuation has also gone down. We're looking at Shark Tank, the American version, the Shark Tank that we're seeing here in India. Do you think the episode and the series that we're seeing online and on the OTT platforms, on television, that has sort of like, it's not giving us the real picture? There's a lot of discrepancy in how actually startups fare in the market and what kind of episodes we see on television.
The Shark Tank show is an ideal platform where you have a set of venture capitalists, if I may use the term, they call themselves sharks, who are willing to put in money in a span of maybe after a presentation of maybe 5 minutes.
Right.
So that's an ideal scenario.
And all these contestants that go on that show, they're also, I'm sure, thoroughly picked, and there's a proper screening process for all of them as well.
I'm sure that is.
So that means that is but the 5% of actual startups that we have in our country.
I'm sure it's a very small percentage.
Very small percentage.
They have a small season which lasts few months. So, and if in each episode they probably have.
And all of these contestants, from listening to the talking heads, listening to your viewpoints on this also, all of these startups are trying to use that shortcut, reach that farthest goal in a short amount of time. But you have to pay the price for that. What is the price that they're paying, and how dangerous is it for budding startups in today's time?
See, it's a it's a marketplace in transition.
Like Mohandas Pai says in the documentary, he says, well, everybody wants to be rich, and what's wrong with that?
Like we discussed, this word came into common lexicon only maybe a decade and a half ago. So it's a new market, and it's extremely competitive. And because it's extremely competitive, customer acquisition and the cost of customer acquisition and getting ahead becomes that much more difficult. So that is why in the initial stages, if profitability is excusable, it's all right. Value creation has to be there. And while you said that values have gone down this year, if you allow me, if you indulge me, I can give you the comparisons of the unicorns that have happened this year vis-a-vis the last year.
Absolutely,
in India.
do go on.
In India, we have had 0. Last year, we had 21 new unicorns.
In 2022. All right.
Since January 2023, first half, not a single unicorn has been added to that list. If you take the sum total of the whole world, there were 349 added in 2022. It came down to 44.
Globally. None in India, however.
None in India. European Union, 54 last year, just 8 this year. North America, 201 last year, 21 this year. North of 20 this year. Asia, 83 last year, 14. None of them in India. So it has come down throughout. There's a liquidity crunch. The interest rates are rising. The money has been sucked out.
These are potential factors behind the devaluation.
These are the factors. One of the factors. Then there is turmoil in the whole world. There's an oil crisis. There is a war going on because of which prices of certain commodities are up.
Right, certainly.
There's a looming recession, and there are interest rates going up. Most of the countries and blocks are basically struggling with controlling inflation. So that is why liquidity is down. Maybe it will turn around once liquidity is up and there's more market, and the valuations will come up again.
Well, certainly. What are current market trends today, and how do they impact various, startups? I've been looking at you doing a lot of news on Byju's. In terms of edtech, Byju's is one of those top names, and it seems like they're having some sort of difficulties themselves.
No, Byju's is a unique case. Probably in their quest for customer acquisition and market penetration, they probably overspent.
Just like the cashback that PayPal used, and today Paytm and all these, cashback is the word. It's synonymous with online payment.
Not just cashback, they basically had to grow their brand. So they hired the best of brand ambassadors in Shah Rukh Khan. They were sponsoring the Indian cricket team. So probably they spent a little bit more than
got a little carried away.
Carried away.
But
they are on course to their turnaround, and they were market leaders in a space that they probably created in India, edtech.
And they also acquired a lot of smaller fish
Smaller
in the sea
companies.
as well.
Akash Byju's was an acquisition. So that was one
Greater
of
Learning.
Yeah. So the White Hat Junior.
Right.
So these were some of the acquisitions they did, but that is one unique case. Venture capitalists are also becoming more circumspect while at the time of doling out cash to these startups, and that is all a factor of basically the liquidity crunch that is happening in the marketplace for all the reasons that we have already listed down.
If I could put you on the spot here, and your experience and your expertise, if I were to put that to the test, and you can choose to refrain from answering this as well. As somebody who covers business news, can you make any kind of predictions for the second half of this year? Are we going to see any new corns being added to the list?
I am hopeful. I am hopeful, and I hope it happens. And we are probably, the worst is past us, and that is something that one of our talking heads also mentioned. So I am very hopeful that some startups will happen in the other 6 months, 5 months that are left of this year. Also because the rise in interest rates has at least come to a pause, at least in some parts of the West. So that will probably there'll be more money in the market that these startups can go after, and their valuations then will go, and they can spend it for their customer acquisition and value creation and market penetration exercises. So there will be more money in the markets, valuations will go up, and unicorns
There were some
happen.
examples in the documentary: Facebook, Google, YouTube, Instagram, and how Instagram and YouTube had homes in Facebook, Meta, and Google. What was different for them then? What is different for startups today? Why are they in such a thriving position? Because we've seen movies on Google and Facebook as well. On Mark Zuckerberg's life, you've got autobiographies out there, and they've made their fair share of mistakes, and they have overspent as well. What is it that we've got different?
Then is not too far away. There was at the turn of the century is when YouTube and Google happened. So it's not too long ago. They were not profitable when they started out, but they was, one, solving a problem, two, they were creating value, and three, the customers they could basically challenge the customer imagination, who basically thrived onto their platforms in droves.
They also banked on the fact that it was just the advent of social media that they were riding high on.
And they came out with very innovative products. So,
we're still using Facebook and Instagram.
And then they found basically a cushion in these big companies that took them over and gave them that leeway to spend, to experiment, to innovate, lose if they have to for a time, just so that they can basically win in the long run. And look at where all the names that you took, where are they now? And I think we are in that phase right now. 5 years down the line, most of these companies will be basically poster boys of the startup universe in whichever space they have created for themselves, in India and abroad. It is the right time for Indian unicorns to basically Indian startups to take on the world. That is going to happen. I believe that's going to happen sooner than we expect.
Is it a case of people, getting confused between what is value creation and what is money making? Because a lot of people who step out into this venture of, let's, build a new startup, let's start with a new startup, let's put our money here, let's look for investors. You've got a crazy new idea, man, let's open up a startup. Hey man, that sounds like a really cool idea, let's start a startup. Why do you want to start a startup? Not because you want to create value in other people's lives, but because you want to yourself become rich. These two things must go hand in hand. If they're devoid of each other, then I think it's a recipe for disaster. Or do I have it wrong here?
You cannot become rich if you're not basically catering to a space that has been left vacant in the marketplace. So if there was a space for market for online education, because there was a space, somebody who wanted to become rich, if we have to use that terminology, came up with a product, gave value to its customers who basically liked it and then basically came in more numbers. And that is how he or she became rich if they did. So the
which
value
essentially
has
means
a
they're
problem
both
has to be
indirect,
solved.
right?
Yes.
They're both directly connected.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, how about I start a new edtech company? But the idea is, creating value can take the back seat here. My focus is going to be getting in the right kind of money. And that, I think, is going to be like shooting yourself in the foot.
Unless you have an innovative product, and that's where
I mean, of course, if your product is the utopian product, then there is no denying that you will be the next billionaire on this planet. But
I'll give you an example of something that I read somewhere, and I have not seen a better example, definition of a startup. A startup is the smallest group of people you can convince to plan to build a different future. A different future is where your innovation comes in. Startups are basically in incubation chambers for a new idea. If that works, venture capitalists and bigger companies will lap it up.
Certainly.
And you will get the cushion, these startups get the cushion to basically expand.
Why is it that
on
startups
that
are
idea.
so happy with being, sucked in and, acquired by these bigger fishes, the bigger fish, the sharks in general? These smaller fish are happy that the shark come in and, take us over.
It gives them the latitude to basically expand and experiment more. If you have more money, you can experiment.
But then the control goes to the other, the bigger shark.
It does. But those bigger sharks still need the minds of these startup entrepreneurs.
And the startups also, because of their overspending, go to a position, reach a position where they are pressured into, then selling their, company off because they need the money as well.
See, a bigger fish allows you to fail and start off again.
All right.
If you have limited money, that latitude is not there.
All right. And this cash on tap analogy that you were talking about,
we just mentioned liquidity is not there. So there was a time when the venture capitalists were basically doling out cash to anybody with a slightly innovative idea that caught the imagination of the venture capitalists and the market. That situation is not right now. The venture capitalists and banks and angel investors are very much more circumspect. They are looking at bottom lines now, profitability, customer acquisitions, market penetration,
so it's high time,
brand.
It's high time that these startups start worrying about their bottom lines.
They've already started.
They've already started.
This
honeymoon period.
That cycle has already begun.
Let's just wrap this conversation up. I don't want the viewers to be left waiting. I really want them to take a look at the second episode as well, so that they can connect the dots as to why the devaluations now in 2023, why no unicorns. But just to wrap it up, this unicorn and startup honeymoon period, is this over now? Is this a situation of a bubble burst, or is this a pure reality check?
I think it's a phase. When liquidity goes up, I think that phase will turn around again. Maybe not to the extent that it was last few years, but it will turn around again. Right now, there are basically extraneous factors that are affecting this space right now. So, factors which nobody has control over, whether it's a war, whether it's the oil situation, whether it's a looming recession, interest rates going up, money being sucked out, all of that. So but I believe once the liquidity situation eases out, the situation will turn around again.
But the bottom line still remains that there is no replacement for value creation.
No replacement for innovation, no replacement for value creation.
And if you have the product that puts across the right kind of information, can convince, like you said, a small group of people that it is adding the right kind of value in your life, well, then there's no price on it. It becomes priceless, doesn't it?
It becomes priceless.
It becomes priceless. Well,
nailed it.
Many thanks for joining with us here, Amit. I hope I have nailed it, and I hope Indian startups also start nailing it in the second half of this year.
Yes.
Fingers crossed, and we can only hope that good sense prevails. On that note, we're going to wrap this up. The second episode is out. It's out today. I think the real Shark Tank was out last night. Do watch it. We're of course giving you a free preview, but if you want to share it across, we're now on various streaming services. We're now available on the television, on your mobile phones. Do download the News9 Plus application for other incisive analysis and cutting-edge documentaries as well. That's all the time I have for you. This is Kabir Naqvi signing off. But the second episode, why the devaluations in 2023? Here's that portion, that episode. Watch it. Have a nice time. Thanks for watching News9.
Days of glory for startups have unfortunately reduced to days of devaluation.
So any investors who are investing in Series A, B, C are tempering down their valuations because they know there is no investor of last resort to come and bail them out.
Investors love to invest behind companies that are getting the customers' money.
The stuff we do from a fiscal prudence is to disabuse themselves of the notion that there is always capital available on tap.
Days of easy money have been over for a while, and this funding winter has been a prolonged one. It's finally beginning to chill Indian startups pretty much to their bones. Now, it all started in 2022 with inflation and all the cycle after cycle rate hikes that we've seen across central banks. They've tried to suck out money, and that money has been sucked out from the startup ecosystem and invested in US Treasury bonds, for example, safer havens. Now, what's really happening with this is that these sharks, the venture capitalists, are now swimming out of the Shark Tank. As a result of this, valuations have been in a downward spiral. Companies like Byju's, Swiggy, Meesho, Ola, Oyo, Farm Easy, they've seen their valuations dwindle pretty much to the trickle.
So when we had a low interest rate environment, which is what we had for most of the last decade itself, it actually prompted a large number of people who were searching for returns or yield to start taking more risky investments and more risky bets. It's why a large amount of money started coming to startups also. But I think what threw a spanner in that works is the fact that interest rates actually started rising, and this prompted the cost of capital to go up, and this actually reduced the amount of capital available.
The other important factor is to note is that bigger players or bigger venture capitalists in the ecosystem like Tiger and SoftBank, who were often the next round of investors and paid unjustified valuations, have also become conservative. So any investors who are investing in Series A, B, C are tempering down their valuations because they know there is no investor of last resort to come and bail them out, which was often the case in 21-22 when SoftBank, Tiger wrote checks of valuations which are often very unjustified and revenue multiples which are unheard of ever in the history of valuations.
So unfortunately, there isn't one crystallized formula for calculating valuations. How do you derive that formula for valuation? Should it be, let's say, 10x of revenue? Should it be 40x of profits? Now, should you be looking at these financials at all when arriving at valuations, or should you be looking only at growth, customer acquisition, cash burn, building the brand? What?
When you look at public markets and you see the prices of shares, they go up and they go down, depending on company performance, depending on liquidity in the market, depending on market sentiment. Private markets are not published every day, the valuations, but the valuations there also are capable of moving up and down on the same parameters.
Valuation ultimately is a present value of future cash flows. Investors expect companies to actually generate cash, and profitability is more important. So that's driving the valuation downturn of some of these bigger companies like Baiju and Swiggy.
And one of these hallmarks of companies who are valued 1 billion and above, especially your unicorns, is that look, you become a fairly large business by yourself. So now you need to end up figuring out a way to balance growth as well as profitability also. And in case a company is unable to actually match that expectation of the market and investors, they will end up actually marking these kind of businesses down and end up moving on.
Deca-corns, which are companies with a valuation of $10 billion and above, have become an extinct species almost. And look at unicorns. The rate at which unicorns were getting added to Indian startups every year has come to a halt in 2023. Calendar year 2023, for the first 6 months, H1 has not seen a single addition to the list of unicorns. And why is this happening? Again, this absence of a clear-cut formula to arrive at a real valuation. Eventually, it boils down to a mutual negotiation between an investor and an investee. And what are they both really looking at? The investor is looking at the next potential exit where his or her investments return a handsome profit. The investee, on the other hand, the founder of the startup, is looking for more cash, which increases the valuation at one hand and gives the headroom to burn more cash in a bid to create a brand or acquire customers and define growth in whatever way growth is defined.
A lot of the startups we talked about today have also spent a lot of money on above the line advertisements. They've sponsored cricket, they've sponsored World Cup. I don't understand how this helps their fundamental business model, right? So all of these excesses need to go away, and you need to have more sensible driving of business and driving of growth, which, by the way, a lot of companies know. If you today are not a startup, if you're a company like a listed company in the public space, you are delivering returns, you are delivering growth. So I think that's the mantra which startups should follow.
If you are valuation driven and your valuation is based on your sales and top line and not on your profit, right, you will tend to spend a lot of money just to acquire customers and to get sales, never mind profits. Especially if you have competition that is well funded and doing the same thing.
There was this mantra of grow at all costs. So everyone said that, look, if the metrics my investors are looking at are, let's say, the number of new customers I'm getting, or the number of the average transaction value, or the GMV I'm generating from a business, I'm going to study the way I study for exams. I will just answer those 3 questions and damn everything else that goes about running a business. Now that was unfortunately the mentality if you look at e-commerce and certain verticals, where the name of the game was just customer acquisition at whatever cost, and eventually they will end up paying and they'll end up becoming more profitable and going about that entire path. So I think that was a race to the bottom that has thankfully ended up correcting right now.
All investors are now very shy in this environment to invest in models which are cash burn models. So today, if you're a startup where you are burning cash for the foreseeable future, you will not find an investor who's willing to invest in you, because his investors, his LPs, have also told him not to invest in cash burn models.
When liquidity gets constrained, as it is now, people come back to prudent commercial practices, and that's what is happening. Right? You are now looking at unit economics. You're looking at EBITDA. You're looking at profits. You're looking at cash flows. These are all good, sound, sensible metrics to look at, and I'm glad that the market has now shifted to this.
The stuff we do from a fiscal prudence is to disabuse themselves of the notion that there is always capital available on tap.
I will say what I have always said, which is that the customer's money is better than the investor's money. So if you're getting the customer's money, the investor's money will almost certainly follow, because investors love to invest behind companies that are getting the customer's money.
We'll end up looking at the size of the market and the real addressable market. Not just India as a country of 1.4 billion people, my service will end up catering to all 1.4 billion buyers, etc. These are all what I call Excel dreams. These work well on an Excel sheet, but they always fail when they clash with reality.
So I believe this crisis will create stronger companies. We will see far more sustainable companies, companies which look like companies which can be global leaders, and a crisis is the best time to produce companies like this. So companies which survive this funding winter and outlast the companies which can't raise capital will be the ones which are the winners of the future.
Some will die, some will succeed, some will consolidate. Right? But that's a part of the startup ecosystem. Startups are, the entrepreneurial ecosystem is Darwinian in nature. It's survival of the fittest. Not everybody makes it, and that's life. But I see more and more entrepreneurs trying. So I see that in medium term, long term, it will only thrive. But yes, some will fail.
Some will obviously sustain their businesses. They have the runway and the hunger to continue running on that run to eventually take off. The rest of them will fall short of expectations of their investors and of their customers alike.
Gautam Adani, one of the richest men in the world, or a business honcho, accused of manipulating the market.
अदानी जी 609 नंबर से दूसरे नंबर तक कैसे पहुंचे? सिर्फ एक सवाल पूछा, नरेंद्र मोदी जी, आपका अदानी जी से रिश्ता क्या है?
He has given the space, the railways, the airport, which he has no experience also. So the country's interest has been compromised.
Government has been very clearly supporting few industrial groups, including Adani's industrial group.
Target Adani, streaming now.
He thought he could outlast us. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room.
Who will blink first?
So far from preventing the expansion of NATO, Russian actions have actually resulted in the expansion of NATO.
It's a mess for Russia and it's a mess for the Western world, for NATO and the United States.
Putin is a dictator, and if he loses, that means the end of his regime, and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2, no end in sight. Streaming now.
No country can have an independent foreign policy if it is going to be dependent on others for its defense.
In the last 2 years, there has been hardly any new defense equipment that we have ordered from abroad.
2025 is a target where exports worth 35,000 crores have to be achieved.
The message was loud and clear at the Defence Expo 2022. Make in India and export it to the world.
We have converted our Defence Expo and Aero India annual events from being events where foreign OEMs used to showcase what they had to sell to events where we showcase what we have to offer to Indian Armed Forces as well as to the rest of the world.
When we are inviting foreign countries to set up in partnership with our private sector, it will also have a very important export component. They will manufacture here because our costs are low, relatively cheaper inputs that will come from India to actually make their exports more competitive.
India is the second largest arms importer in the world. it imports 11% of all global defense output. Now it has begun exporting defense platforms and products to 75 countries.
There was a time when we were practically importing 90 to 100% of our requirement. Later on, we came to a time where we did a lot of manufacturing here, but it was all licensed transfer of technology-based manufacturing. The difficulty in such manufacturing is that once you are taking a license, there is restriction on the quantity you can produce, there is restriction on export, and there is also restriction on any further upgrade or changes you want to make to the system. So really speaking, even when we were doing manufacturing, we were really not self-reliant. We were dependent on the country or the OEM who had licensed the technology.
There were live experiences where in 1962 we were not given the whatever material we needed to save our sovereignty, and then in 1965 also we were denied. Even in 1999 we didn't get that kind of support from those on whom we were dependent.